Committee of the Whole to order. All right, we are now recording. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Allard?
Here.
Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Presverdia? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera? Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
And Ms. Zalatel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So before we get started, I had a request from a member to add an item to the agenda, the AO that the administration laid on the table on Tuesday night related to borrowing from the alcohol tax cash pool for FEMA reimbursement. And so Desiree very helpfully created a new agenda that moves the alcohol tax and the FEMA tax subject up to our second item after the Budget Advisory Commission, and includes that AO. And so I guess I'd like a motion to accept this new agenda, which has also been posted online and emailed out. Can I get that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no objection, we'll go forward with this version of the agenda. Okay, so we'll start with the report from the Budget Advisory Commission. Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So we had our regular monthly meeting the first Thursday of the month. So that was March 3rd. We heard a great overview presentation of the school board budget from the staff there. And I understand that you guys had passed it on Tuesday night this week. And then we also heard just a very brief overview from OMB about the process and the timeline for first quarter budget revisions. So we didn't get into the content there because I understand it was early in the process, but that we're going to be dedicating a chunk of our April meeting to that. And then we also heard a great informational overview about the Port of Alaska, so specifically the capital projects being recommended or proposed for that. So appreciate OMB for aligning that up. And I believe that is it.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Brawley or any thoughts for the Budget Advisory Commission? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you as always for your work, and I apologize that I wasn't able to come this month. Hopefully I can make it next month. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to our new item B, which is update on the 2021 and 2022 alcohol beverage retail sales tax program. And the administration has provided us with a document on that. It's called 2022 Alcohol Funded Status Report. And so hopefully there's someone here to explain and present on that. And then either before, during, or after that, I'd like to have a discussion about the COVID-19 interfund loan that was laid on the table on Tuesday night by the administration. So is there someone here from OMB or from Treasury or CFO to speak on the alcohol tax?
Mr. Chairman, this is Cheryl Frasca. Okay, when you refer to a document that you have, I don't know what document that is. So maybe it's something that came from Treasury. OMB provided the program status report for 2022 programs, and Finance was to provide information about 2021 projected versus actuals, and then 22 update. So if you could narrow down which one you're looking at, that would be helpful.
Ms. Camacho, do you want to put that up on the screen and so we're all up on the same presentation? Is this the presentation from
Yes,
you?
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman,
Fresco?
thank you. This is the one that OMB solicited an update from the departments to provide the information requested regarding program status update for 2022 expenditures. And so the far right column, the program status update, reflects the responses from the departments.
Okay. Do you want to just quickly walk us through this?
Not particularly. That was a joke, sort of. Okay, sure. From the first section, child abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence related appropriations. Actually, on your assembly agenda the other night was the appropriation to the Anchorage School District for early education grants, partially funded by this $1.4 million. You can see the second one, evidence-based grants. The department was meeting yesterday to review the requests that had come in to receive some of those funds. So they anticipate making a decision in near future. On the third one, I'm waiting for some more information about this, so I can't speak to that one yet. And the library has the early literacy specialist build.
Let me, can I pause you there
Yes,
for one
of
moment,
course.
Nebraska? So this comment will sort of apply, I think, to the entire document, but I'll just highlight it here and maybe not bring it up again. But for example, the column that says 2022 approved total. And at the very top it says early education grants to providers 1.4 million. But unless I'm misremembering, that wasn't the approved total for 2022. The assembly approved $2 million in our budget and then was vetoed and then overrode the mayor's veto. And so it was a 2 million. Am I misremembering that number?
No. And I heard that also earlier this week. And this is based on the budget as OMB viewed it, but I will be glad our analyst who handled all that, she is out of town due to a death in her family, and she's due back tomorrow, and I will be glad to clarify as soon as she gets back.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess I'm perhaps we have to wait for her. But I mean, so for example, the $2 million you have there of evidence-based grants for child abuse, that I think was the approved amount. I think it was 2 million. And so how does OMB decide which ones are given the full amount that the assembly approved and which ones are not given the full amount the assembly approved?
Sure. Well, they should be the amount, the final, in terms of the alcohol funded grants, it should be what the final decision was after all the dust settles. And I apologize because I was not here during this process. And so if you want, if it's okay, I'd like to wait and review this with the analyst who did handle this and then follow up with a reply, especially if your question is just starting out on the first one and you have similar questions about some of the other numbers. And so if it would be okay, I'd like to sift through the dust and firm up what is and what isn't.
For sure. And yeah, I don't intend to repeat this over and over. For example,
Okay.
the $920,000 for mental health first responders, I don't think that's the amount that the assembly approved. And so I just don't want folks to get tripped up on that language, 2022 approved total. I don't think that's what that column actually is. I think it's something like that's what was loaded into the budget, but that wasn't what was approved by the assembly.
So you think that's what was proposed by the administration?
No,
Okay,
I think
apologize, but
I think
this
it's a
should be
number
facts.
between those two.
Yeah, and this should be facts, and we shouldn't have to talk about it because they should be facts as represented here. So I do apologize, but I if you can give me a couple of days, I'll get back to you with a clarification and corrections if necessary.
Okay. Thank you very much. And yeah, so please continue. And I don't intend to bring that up again, just to note kind of for the record that I don't think that column accurately represents what the assembly approved.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do appreciate that.
Before we move on from this category, I'm in the queue.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Zalato, I didn't see. Yes, Ms. Zalato?
Thanks. Yeah, that first line, early education grants to providers, I was wondering what the intersection, and again, this may be a question to take back, is between the approved amount and the recent appropriation in the consent agenda this last meeting of almost $2 million to ASD.
Correct.
So I just, another area to square. So I just wanted to raise that. I know you're coming in on it, but we did just approve those monies out the door.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future, that could be a third column is appropriate, like we can identify the appropriation if they were subsequently appropriated, so we can just track it as we go. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. So like grants awarded or contracts let kind of thing?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Zalato. Thank you, Ms. Frasca.
Okay. So you want me, so first responders, fire, the positions are filled. Except for there was hired the battalion chief, they're using an actor or someone's filling that role. Municipal attorney, those two positions are filled. Police, all 4 positions have been hired. So in the homelessness, mental health, substance misuse, pay for success program, the CFO's office is meeting with United Way, reporting regarding some reporting related issues. And so they hope to make a final payment regarding 21, at least in the near future. In the health department, the accountant has been hired. And you can see here that and this is where, frankly, Mr. Chairman, we had some discussions with the department about what was funded and what wasn't. So I did have a heads up and an alert about some questions here. So this will be part of our clarification. If I apologize again for the fact that we need to do that. So they're swirling around the positions. The community resource coordinator is a filled position, as well as, oh, that's at the library, as well as the assistant community resource coordinators. And then Parks and Rec is fully staffed as it relates to the camp abatement efforts. And then on the 3rd page, equity and justice officer is filled, as you know. Finance has positions that are both of which are filled, and then their tax collection program is the $4,000 is a small amount toward the cost of the alcohol and bed tax collection modules that they use. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Frasca. Let's see here. I thought, and I could be mistaken about this, I'm trying to remember. I don't think in our budget, we moved a number of health positions out of the alcohol tax and into the general budget. And I just want confirmation that all of these positions were actually in the alcohol tax portion of the budget that the Assembly passed.
Okay. I will follow up and let you know, confirm that or let you know otherwise.
Yeah, I think we shifted these programs into the general budget and then they were paid for by bed tax. And if that's the case, then, you know, I think that we may, it's an interesting question. We have a separate budget for the alcohol tax that the Assembly approved. And it strikes me as not legal to fund things out of the alcohol tax budget that the Assembly didn't approve to be in there. And so I think that's something we need to discuss, but I could also be misremembering. I don't remember exact. I know we moved some positions and we didn't move, but we didn't move all of them. And so I just need confirmation that these were actually positions that the Assembly put in the alcohol tax budget.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be glad to report back. And again, my apologies.
Okay. All right, moving. I think that's probably it. Are there any other questions? Ms. Zalato says that I'm correct in that these are not positions we funded in the alcohol tax.
Okay,
Ms.
and I'm not one to argue with Ms. Zalato.
Yes, the epidemiologists and the public health nurses in particular, because I remember the discussion distinctly that if we were going to do the epidemiologists from the alcohol tax, it would need to be specifically looking at the dedication areas within the alcohol tax, which isn't impossible, but that policy decision wasn't made and it was moved out of the alcohol tax.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that if that's the case, it's partly an OMB question, but I think it's also partly a legal question, and we need to discuss it probably at or before first quarter budget revisions. Because again, it strikes me that the Assembly didn't approve alcohol tax funds for that purpose, and I don't think you can just move funds between two different portions of the budget, given especially the alcohol tax with very specific language on how it can be spent, and we even create a dedicated fund for it. And so I think that's a legal question we need to discuss, but I'm not asking you to discuss it here today, Ms. Frasca, but I think it's something we need to definitely flag.
Yeah, we'll resolve the OMB issue first, and then if necessary. But yes, again, apologies.
Okay. Alrighty. So let's move on then in discussion to the question of the laid on the table ordinance from the mayor's office or from the administration, 2022-44. Do we have a copy of that we could put on the screen, maybe, Ms. Camacho? Thank you. Okay. Is there someone from the administration who can speak to this about what it is and how it works? And just at first blush, to me, this seems to be violating the ballot initiative. The ballot initiative says we can only spend these monies on very specific things, on first responders, on drug treatment and that kind of thing. And this seems to be paying for COVID response. And so I'd like to hear a description of why we're doing this and then why it's legal.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, this is Cheryl Frasca again. So why we're doing it is the $7 million is to go toward paying the final 3 months of the activities at the Sullivan, at the guest house, all the other homeless related efforts that we have, the mass care. The reason and the language about the COVID-19 response, AO fund, et cetera, is similar to all the other potential FEMA reimbursements that we would like to get, that we're requesting. So that's how it's connected to COVID. In terms of the use of the alcohol tax funds to support these services, one of the purposes for the alcohol tax, as evidenced by the appropriations that the Assembly has made, has been to support homelessness and related issues. And so that's the response to why alcohol tax proceeds are being used as the source for the interfund loan, which is the mechanism that the Assembly has used a number of times in order to fund COVID and related expenses.
Thank you, Ms. Frasca. I have Ms. Zalto. I'm sorry,
Thank
was
you.
that? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Zalto.
I have 2 questions, I believe. I think it's just 2. The first is, I believe previous instances of this type of ordinance have been emergency ordinances to underscore the emergent nature of the need to, I think part of that was to assist in the FEMA reimbursement. I can verify that, but I believe all the rest have been emergency ordinances, even though they were set for public hearing. So I just wanted to flag that. The other question I have, though, is if we identify a fund source, a specific fund source other than our savings or the 101 loans, I'm wondering if that then jeopardizes the chance for reimbursement, because as we know, FEMA is a payer of last resort, and we're saying, well, there's this pot of money here that we could use to pay for this. So could we touch on that a little bit or get some clarification?
Sure. Well, this is Cheryl again, and Alden can chime in here too. But according to Alden, that FEMA only we submit the receipts for what we've spent to FEMA. They don't look at the source of the funds. So the fact that it's coming from an alcohol tax fund isn't any different in FEMA's eyes to 101 or whatever fund it might be. In terms of the AO, you did versus an EO, you did appropriate, you did use an AO for $25 million worth of authorization to spend related to COVID. You've also used the EO, the emergency order, for 92 million or almost 93 million. So you've used both tools in the past to help meet COVID related / hopefully FEMA reimbursed expenses.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Zolotel.
Thanks. Thanks for knowing when we use the EOs versus the AOs. I was just trying to look it up and it's not really clear from the document portal. I am curious, where is this the 2022 alcohol tax funds that are proposed to be used? So out of the current, so we just went through the appropriations in the other slides. So is this from those buckets? And if so, then how do we fund the services that were intended to be funded by the alcohol tax in FY22?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, 22.
Yeah. Through the chair, Ms. Zolotel, these are funds, these are 2021 unspent dollars that go into the alcohol tax fund balance. So these are last year's monies. And so they have no impact on 2022 programs.
So I'm going to
Thank
jump in there with a question though. Last night we spoke with, in talking about something else, Dan Moore spoke to the assembly and he said that there were $2.3 million of unspent 2021 funds, but this is asking for $7 million in borrowing. So how do you explain the discrepancy there?
Well, I think what Mr. Moore was speaking to was how much more alcohol tax revenues came in compared to what was budgeted. And so what he was saying is 2.4 million came in higher than what was originally budgeted in 2021. And he's online and he can certainly clarify if needed.
This is Dan Moore. Cheryl, what Cheryl said is correct. The number is, I spoke on Tuesday night off the top of my head, but it looks like it was $2.2 million positive variance when comparing the 2021 budget versus 2021 actual.
Okay, so that was not what I understood you to say tomorrow. So yesterday's Tuesday night, man. So you're saying we have $7 million or more of unspent alcohol tax money in the fund now from 2021?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Zolotel, you're in the queue.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up for my purposes. It's my intention to bring an amendment to this item at the special meeting. I believe it's going to be on the 23rd, to do as we've done throughout, which is the 101 interfund loan. I do have concerns. I've got conflicting information, I must say, about identifying a readily available fund source like the alcohol tax and the ability to get reimbursed. And I want to be cautious about the ability to get reimbursed. And I know there's some concerns about reimbursement, but unless we are absolutely certain and there's some kind of specific documentation about that, I'm not ready to divert from what we've done to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zolotel. So I have one more question, then I'll have Ms. Kennedy and Ms. LaFrance. So does this document specify how long we have to pay it back, or will it be specified? I mean, it can take obviously the years to get reimbursed by FEMA. So what's the time frame for reimbursing this fund?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the document does not speak to a payback period, so it would be up to what Mr. Alden, he could maybe speak to that if FEMA has a length of time by which they'll then reimburse you after the fact. But otherwise, from this document's drafting, there is no time frames. We'll keep the paperwork going for as long as it takes to get reimbursed or not.
Thank you, Ms. Frasca. Okay, Ms. Kennedy and then Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I wanted a little bit of clarification on terminology that we're using here as well. And that is, we're talking about $7 million worth of unspent funds. Are we saying that those are also unencumbered funds? So they are literally additional money in the alcohol tax revenue bucket that we have neither allocated nor spent on something else. But anyway, so can you just clarify for me, are we really talking about the difference between unspent and unencumbered? And then I have another question. Thanks.
All right. Ms. Kennedy, they would be unspent monies. These are revenues that you budgeted last year. At the end of the year, they had been unspent. And so they fall back into the alcohol tax bucket.
Okay, so if they're, can I follow up on that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. If they're unspent, then that tells me that we just haven't spent them yet, because I'm pretty sure we designated or allocated just about everything that we thought we would be getting in terms of revenues to some project or department. Is that not correct, that we actually left a potential of $7 million that were just unallocated then?
Well, through the chair, they were allocated, they were appropriated to departments. But, you know, sometimes government doesn't actually spend every dollar that it gets. And I think you'll see that when we talk about the municipalities' budget to actuals for 2021 in the bigger sense. But yes, these are monies that did not get spent last year. And so instead of falling into the general treasury, they stay earmarked in the revenue, alcohol tax revenues bucket. And so then they became available to spend in this year, 2022. And so that's why we're proposing, because they're available to spend in 2022, we were proposing that they be spent on these homeless related programs, which then did not have any impact on those programs that were approved for 2022.
Okay, no, that helps. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
That's just very interesting. You usually think in terms of the fact that once you give somebody money, it gets spent, but okay. And then one more question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. But we are basically still using an interfund loan procedure in this AO. So this isn't really any different. We're just still having to designate, just like we would basically be having an interfund loan, the way we've done these other ones, the past emergency ordinances that we've used to address COVID response in the Sullivan Arena. We used interfund loan processes through the cash pool. So this is just designating a more specific source, which would basically be the unspent alcohol tax. Is that fair to say?
Through the chair, that's correct. However, this is not being proposed as an emergency order. This is being proposed as an AO instead of an EO. And so the difference is that under the EO, the emergency order, that if FEMA doesn't reimburse us, there's the potential to go to taxpayers to make up what FEMA did not reimburse. And so in this case, the AO is not relying on that mechanism that if FEMA doesn't reimburse the city, then there would be less money in the alcohol tax pool, the fund. You would not go to taxpayers to make up the money to go into the alcohol tax fund.
Okay, great. So
Madam
it's a
Chair, I
safeguard.
apologize.
Thank you.
Can Cheryl repeat that again? I apologize.
Okay. So regarding the difference between the emergency order, the AO and the EO, so with an
Yes,
EO,
please. I just want to hear it again, Claire. Thank you.
Okay. With an emergency order or the EO, you have the ability to go to taxpayers, increase property taxes if FEMA decides not to or denies a reimbursement. Okay, and so in a report that we have, you'll see those numbers when we get to the status report of FEMA reimbursement, as opposed to an AO, where in this case, this proposal does not rely on going to taxpayers, property taxpayers, if FEMA denies reimbursement. So instead, then the alcohol tax fund would not be reimbursed by property taxpayers and would be less. It would be out this money.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Ms. LaFrance now, and then I have a quick follow-up question too. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to touch on something that Ms. Zalatel raised concerning specific documentation. And Ms. Frasca, thank you for the information. I also want to convey to the administration that I would need to see that same specific documentation Ms. Zalatel referred to, showing that using these 2021 unspent alcohol tax funds does not jeopardize the FEMA reimbursement. I would need to see that very clearly in order to support this ordinance. And then a follow-up as well concerning Ms. Kennedy's questions about unencumbered and unspent funds, and in the discussion about how sometimes departments don't spend what's budgeted, and if it would be helpful too to see what wasn't spent, because I'm curious, given we have received a number of questions from members of the public concerning the status of some of the programs and allocations concerning alcohol tax revenues. So if you would be able to provide those specifics concerning what wasn't spent and what programs those were going to support, that would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Will
you,
do.
Ms. Yeah, thank you, Mr. France. That was going to be my question too. I mean, you got that $7 million number, 2.3 or $2.4 million is because we, collected more than we expected. And so that still leaves, 4.6 or 4.7 million that was appropriated and encumbered and not spent. And I suspect I know what it is. I think it's things like the treatment center and that kind of thing. But if you could provide us with the actual details, that would be excellent. I'm sorry, go
I can
ahead.
make just one clarification too, that actually the 7 million that was being proposed to be appropriated in this AO, there's still an additional about 1.2, 1.3 million that went unspent also. So I don't want you to be surprised that, well, she said there was 7 million, but there's 8.2 million. But anyway, but yes, we will get you that reconciliation.
Thank you. And my last comment on this topic is just, the administration, I think there's some confusion, but the perception amongst myself and my budget co-chair is that the administration at the moment refuses to certify and sort of load the Assembly's budget for 2022. And it seems like these monies could easily make up that difference and then have money left over for something like this. And so another topic of discussion when it eventually does come to us, and something we need to square away at first quarter budget revisions.
Okay.
So, okay, if there's no other comments on this, we'll go on to the FEMA reimbursement discussion. Okay. Moving on, is Mr. Thurn here?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Thurn, and we all received a presentation from you as well. It looks very much like the one you did last month, I believe. But yeah, we want to walk us through that.
If Desiree can put it up on the screen, that would be great. And I'll go over my page first, and then Cheryl can go over the second page, which is the OMB page. And as I stated last month, I'm trying to keep a consistent format for you so that you're seeing the same thing. I will go through and kind of highlight the differences that have occurred since the last report. The most important one probably is in our community testing. We did receive our 4.1 million reimbursement.
for that. So you'll see that we've almost got the entire obligated amount of the 36 million. We did receive a couple of other additional late invoices, so we will actually have to go back to FEMA and get that obligated amount slightly increased in order to be able to get the entire reimbursement. But we did receive that 4.1 million. I did get notice today that either today or tomorrow, the 519,000 that's in the management cost column, which we had not received at the point that I prepared this document. We will receive from the state of Alaska either today or tomorrow. So that little over $500,000 will go into the reimbursed column. So that will put us over 41 million. It's like about 41 million one, 41 million two in reimbursed. So that's the kind of update on the reimbursement side. As far as the obligated side, we were able to get the project right after that, which is the Anchorage Fire Department, for that very small amount of 32,000. We've been notified that FEMA expects to obligate that project as well, either today or tomorrow. So that project will be fall into the obligated column at that point. And then the one above management costs, vaccination operations, I would expect that they are within a week of finally obligating an amount for us to be able to do that. We then do have a multiple month process to work with the state to fill out paperwork and submit our actual reimbursement requests, but certainly getting FEMA to obligate that is the biggest obstacle. And so it looks like 2 of those projects will be getting obligated and should show up in the report by next month. I'm almost certain of that. The other items that I will go over is last month, the report was just under 79 million total in the documented column. We're now sitting at about 87.5 million, and that's we've been able to basically to put another $8 million into those different 4 projects that are the yet to be submitted column down there. So we do continue to make progress towards that. We still have tens of millions to go, but we are, attempting to get those projects, those expenditures at least put into a project so that people know how much we've identified that goes into either a sheltering or a non-sheltering type project as we go. The big 4 projects at the top, which is really the 26 million. Those projects are still being reviewed by FEMA, and we continue to answer questions and provide them data. Almost all of our efforts right now are in the preparation of non-congregate sheltering reporting requirements. And we are down to basically one of our vendors that gave us 4 bankers boxes of documents that we are attempting to automate and get into the FEMA format and be able to submit that. I am hopeful that that will be, once we get those documents entered and into an electronic format, we can submit those back to FEMA, and that they will not have any additional questions, but that this has been a long-term process where they continue to come up with new questions. But currently, the top 4 projects there of that 25 million are waiting for us to prepare the non-congregate reporting in the format that they're looking for.
Alden, I'm sorry, can I pause you here for just a second?
Certainly.
I have Mr. Weddleton in the queue.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So I have a question, but then I'm backing up a bit. So this 25 million, you said top 4. Which are these top 4? I just don't see a total of 25 million on here.
You've got the 10 million 7, the 5 million 5, the 7 million 2,
Okay.
and the 3 million 8. You could just take the 15 and 10 is 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
You will
Yeah, I wasn't
notice-
certain there.
You will notice that the 20 million that's in the not submitted projects, they all have some form of either mass care sheltering or non-congregate sheltering as well. So while we're preparing the reporting functions for the top 4 projects, which really cover us through most of our expenses through June 30th of 2021, we do have to obviously do the reporting on all of our months that we seek reimbursement for. So we are focusing on the top, but we still have to prepare the backup documentation for those lower not yet submitted projects as well.
Okay, so if I could continue, Forrest.
Yes.
So the FEMA obligated column, and maybe you covered this and I missed it, sorry. What does that mean? Because we got that first row, they obligated far less than we wanted and reimbursed less. So are we done or can we go back? And then dropping down to the, I guess 6 or so lines down, says 36 million, which is more than we documented. But we got reimbursed what we documented. I mean, so is there more hanging out there that we could get? And then further down that 1,595,000 is also quite a bit more than we documented. So is that, what's the connection between those?
Certainly, I'll work from the bottom one up. So we've been able to get them to obligate $1,595,000 for management costs. We have documented 519, and as I mentioned earlier, we're receiving that money either today or tomorrow. That means that as we go and document additional management costs, once we get to a significant amount for those, we are able to submit that next reimbursement as long as we don't go over the total of $1,595,000. So that just means that we have another approximately a little over $1 million that FEMA has already approved. We just have to incur costs and then document it. With regards to community testing, we have documented everything that we have so far, and we estimated what our costs were going to be, and that's what FEMA actually obligated. So that's why we're relatively close. However, 2 invoices came in 5 months after the fact, and we now have to pay those 2 invoices. And those 2 invoices are slightly more than what the obligated amount is. So I'm going to have to go back to FEMA, get that $36,048,000 increased to ensure that we have enough money obligated to cover those 2 expenditures. And then we will seek a reimbursement for them. And ultimately on that particular one, what is obligated, we will get reimbursed. There'll be exact numbers all the way across. And then project 1 at the top is a little bit more complicated. They obligated that project under a streamlined format, which they've never done before, to try to help entities fast track items. So they did obligate within a couple of months after the emergency began that $4.5 million. We have submitted to them, and we're almost on 2 years now, the actual expenditure number that we would like that number to be of $10,750,000, and they have gone through dozens of requests for information, and as I mentioned, the additional requirements of all these reporting documents that they are requiring. So we have been preparing and answering them. At some point, if they become satisfied with all of our backup documentation, it is our hope that they would then push that project through to completion, and that project then would be obligated for the $10,750,000 at that point in time. Does that answer all your questions?
That's great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thanks, Alden.
Okay, thank you. If you could continue, Mr. Thurn.
Well, that is kind of the summary of this particular document. If there are any more additional questions, like I said, expect next one's gonna, we will have vaccine obligated in the amount and employee testing, and where we will show the management costs being received. We will continue to try to prepare the reports that FEMA is requiring to try to break the logjam on those top projects. One other comment, we have made some progress with the 5th project down, which is the state of Alaska for 174. I think the number will be slightly less than that, but we have been working actively with them this week to finalize that, and we have a couple more details to work out, but I do think we're getting closer on that particular state project that we're working on. And then, as always, we will continue to document our additional expenditures and putting them into our 2021 projects that are down there on the bottom. From my perspective, it doesn't really benefit us to submit those projects to FEMA until we've gathered all of the 2021 expenditures that go into each one of those. I might have a change of mind if for some reason they break the log jam at the top, because what we have found is FEMA is using one person who has done their extensive analysis of our projects to review all of our projects. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense to keep inundating them with even more, because they're just not getting to them as it is. So that's why we keep preparing putting the documents in the projects below, because we have to do it. But they are getting significantly large numbers.
Thank you. I have two people on the queue, Ms. Zolotel and then Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this, Mr. Thurn. So there's a narrative out there that we've been rejected FEMA funding or reimbursement for congregate and non-congregate shelter, but it's more accurate to say that there are several projects not yet submitted because because the municipality is needing to gather all of the 2021 expenditures and then go through the process. Is that an accurate summation about where we're at?
Through the chair, Ms. Zolotel, it's kind of a mixture of those particular things. The top 4 projects that are listed here for that 27 million, all of those projects have, the top 3 have sheltering related, mass care sheltering, which we would consider to be Sullivan, Ben Boke, Fairview Rec Center, those particular ones. You are correct that they have not approved or obligated pretty much any of that amount of money. We have not submitted any projects that have July 1st, 2021 to current for any kind of any of our reimbursements for that matter. So they haven't even weighed in on those. So we have been working through with FEMA to try to first get them to obligate mass care sheltering through 914. That's what you see, the top 2 projects. That is one of the cutoffs that they have requested that we do. So our congregate sheltering is in a significant portion of our congregate sheltering for that from the beginning of the emergency through 914 resides in those top 2 projects. We then broke a separate project, which is the 3rd project, which is only mass care sheltering from September 15th through 6/30. And they as well have not committed to obligate funds for that at this particular point in time.
So can I ask a follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so where the FEMA funds or where those projects, those top 3 have not been obligated, at which specific step in the process are we in the submission? Is it sitting with FEMA? Is it sitting with the state? Where exactly is it? Are we just waiting because one person is completely overwhelmed? Are we back in the getting more information phase? I guess I don't have a lot of clarity in which phase we're in with regard to those top 3 projects.
Certainly. And I would probably say it's the top 4 projects. So just like the state and everyone else, there's 6 to 10 different levels of review that they go through. Those top 4 projects have been, specifically the top one, which you're referring to, has been reviewed at the 1st level of FEMA. They then came back with multiple rounds of requests for information, and we are attempting to answer the final questions that would allow it to move to some of the additional levels at FEMA. So they are at FEMA. That's when we say submitted projects. They are at FEMA. They're all at FEMA except for that one that's the 5th one down. It says State of Alaska. That was the one that's out there. Those are in FEMA's hands if they have not been obligated, and they are in the review stage or the waiting for us to supply the answers to their questions so that they can continue their review and then ultimately move through their multiple review processes.
Thank you. That was extremely helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Zolotel. Let's see, we have Ms. LaFrance. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm good, actually.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else then on this topic? Okay.
Yeah, we can move to the second page and then Cheryl will take over for that.
Okay, and I we're unfortunately we only scheduled for an hour. Can I get a motion? We're till 1:10. Can I get a motion to extend till 1:20?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, if there's no objection, I'm still hoping we can wrap, get everybody out of here relatively soon. Go ahead, Mr. Thurn.
Yeah.
Oh, Ms.
Okay,
Frasca.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Cheryl Frasca. This is a sort of a different perspective on all the swirling that Alden's report reflects. And this is a good illustration of the difference between the emergency orders and the AOs. Because you can see earthquake emergency orders, that's a summary of what's been authorized and spent and reimbursed. And then we have that column which we discussed last month about potential taxpayer exposure. And so what that's reflecting is that if we don't get reimbursed from FEMA, then taxpayers, you could go to the taxpayers to increase property taxes to recover that amount. And that's contrast. So you can see each of the columns, but that's contrasted with at the very bottom, the COVID AO. It's about 2/3 of the way down because that's not an EO, it's an AO. In this instance, if we don't get reimbursement from FEMA, then it means that we're out the 15.9 million, the potential revenue shortage. And so that's really an illustration of the difference between an AO and an EO in terms of ultimate effect. And so this summary was just to illustrate potentially if FEMA does not reimburse all the work that Alden and crew are doing, that taxpayers could be asked to increase their payments to 59 million. But that's, if FEMA says, sorry, no more reimbursements. So I'd be glad to answer any questions as long as it doesn't have the health department or alcohol tax proceeds in it. That was a joke.
I don't.
That was funny.
I don't see anybody in the queue. I'll just say, I appreciate the way you frame that, Ms. Frasca. I have seen this sort of talking point out there now that, there's this one talking point that some political candidates are saying now that, we had a surplus and now we have a $50 million deficit, or we're $50 million in the hole. And that just is not an accurate representation of our budget situation. Our operating budget is balanced, and balanced when we passed it. And this is, FEMA has not said that they
Mr.
aren't.
Dunbar, I
aren't.
apologize for interrupting, but I don't know if it's appropriate that you talk about what candidates are campaigning on right now.
Well, this is just a talking point that I appreciate that she has clarified, that it is not the case that we are $50 million in the hole, because FEMA hasn't said they aren't going to reimburse us. But okay.
Again,
Thank
I
you.
would refrain, please.
Point of order. I object.
Who's objecting?
This is Ms. LaFrance, Mr. Chair, and I believe it is appropriate to provide factual information about the city's financial situation here.
It is, Ms. LaFrance, if you're not just talking about candidates who are running in a campaign currently. Everything else Mr. Dunbar said, he absolutely he can say it, but not when referring to campaign or candidates. He is running for office.
All right. What I'll say is I have heard in public the misunderstanding that we are at a $50 million deficit. And I appreciate that Ms. Frasca did not phrase it that way, because it is not our operating budget. It is a request we have made of FEMA that could take years to potentially be resolved. So let's move on to our next topic, unless I don't see anybody else in the queue on this one. So I think it is Mr. Frisk. Are you here?
Mr. Chair Dunbar, this is Ross Griswold. I am sitting in for Travis today.
Okay.
And happy to answer any questions.
Yes, so D is our our financial status and monthly revenue report. So Mr. Riswald, do you have anything to say before you hand it over to Dan?
No, I don't. I'd appreciate if Dan went through his summary here, and if there's any further questions, he or I will be glad to address them.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, hello, Mr. Chair, and to the Assembly Committee. This is Dan Moore, the Municipal Treasurer. I'm in the room with Ross and also Paula Reiswick, who works in Treasury. So I'm going to just give really quick highlights because I know you're running behind time-wise. The good news is we're 99.5% final with all the numbers, which is really good. We were waiting up until late last Friday for a big adjustment by the Controller Division that happens every year at the same time, where they have to basically do a journal entry to record what they call deferred revenue, and that relates to property taxes. And in some years that can hurt revenue in a negative way, and some years it actually helps revenue in a positive way. The year that we're talking about, 2021, that year-end entry by the Controller Division actually helped in a positive way by $2.8 million. So that was good news. So overall, the budget is almost exactly, actuals are almost exactly what the budget was, within $200,000 or $300,000. It's amazingly close, and there's no way anyone could predict that, or it just is the way it's happening, but it is right on budget. So that's really good news. The matrix that's there, it covers 19 major revenues. If you were to add all those up and compare them to the grand total of budgeted revenues, this is for general government 100 funds. Those 19 revenues account for 94% of all revenues. And so what you'll see throughout the matrix is for each line, what was budgeted, what is the actual at year end, and then any further explanation. So the three big negative revenues that we had this year that we've reported to the Assembly over a series of months were with personal property tax. That was originally as high as $3 million negative. It went down to $2.4 million negative as a result of that controller entry that was made, journal entry. So personal property tax negative $2.4 million. The other significant negative was cash pool earnings revenue, and that was about $3.5 million negative. And then the third major negative was $1.1 million for EMS. That's the ambulance service revenues. So in total, just those three revenues alone were missing budget, under budget by $7 million. However, we had a number of other revenues that were in the positive. And so effectively, we had a variety of other revenues that added up to $7 million of positive. So basically, the net is zero effectively for the year. The biggest positive areas were in the areas of room tax and rental vehicle tax. Those came in strong, and those kept getting stronger and stronger as the year progressed. We did not know until I think it was mid-February how we would actually end up with 2021 room tax. It turns out that fourth quarter came in stronger than expected by about 20-some%. It was quite a surprise. I think that's primarily due to the pricing of hotels, even in the fourth quarter, which is usually a very low, stable quarter. It turned out to be quite a surprise to us. So those are the highlights of the revenues that are part of general government. And at the very last page, there's reference to the alcohol tax, and that's kind of where it stands. We will provide this information as an AIM document along with every single revenue the city has. We will submit that for your April 12th meeting, and that'll be kind of our final say about 2021. And then we won't resume talking about revenues until about June or maybe July of this year, until we have more of a baseline to operate off of. So that's our report, and I can take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I don't see anybody in the queue. That's very good news, and a testament to the good hard work that you and your department do. Is there anyone else on the phone or in the queue? If not, we will move on to the next topic. Okay, thank you. So now the last one is the update on the 2022 budget from Ms. Frasca with the monthly budget to actuals report. And We also received this in advance. If we get that up on the, it's a little bit small, so it might not be super useful to put it on the screen. But at any rate, if my colleagues want to pull that up, it says Municipality of Anchorage General Government 2021 Budget to Actuals by Department at the top. Ms. Frasca?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you can see is how did the departments end the year in spending the amount that was appropriated to them. And in a way, this relates back to the alcohol tax discussion as well. But if you go down the far right column, you can see where there were two departments that they ended up spending more than what they were budgeted. One is equity and justice, and it's a small amount. It's $12,000, and it related to leave cash out, a large leave cash out that they weren't budgeted for. And then the fire department, and what more can we say about the fire department and the challenge of managing their overtime? So you'll see these two issues resurface in a future appropriation bill to fix this. But if you go down to the very bottom line, where you can see amount over or under the budget, you can see where 22 million that all of the departments, and these are all funds, not just our 100 funds or our 5 major funds, but out of all of the funds, 22 million less was spent than was appropriated. And so included in that would be the alcohol tax proceeds, but you can see that the number is greater than the 7 million that I spoke to when we were talking about the homeless financing. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And there's additional details that are attached to this, but this gives you a flavor.
Thank you, Ms. Frasca. I have Mr. Weddleton, and then, well, I guess after the presentation is over, Ms. LaFrance. Mr. Weddleton?
Okay, 2 questions. One, and this is just, at the top of that column J, it has over would be in parentheses, under not in parentheses, but I think what you present is opposite that, is correct?
Well, it means that they were over in the fire department example, they were 1.281 million
over the budget. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay. Never mind, my confusion.
Eyes crossed.
So,
yeah.
no, so you got it right. I just need to read it carefully. So you're saying that at the end of the year, we had 22 million that were under budget, and this is end of the year?
Correct.
Well, I guess that's good in some regards. I mean, maybe we didn't do things we should have done, so it's hard to know for sure what that represents. But I don't know. Do you have a party or something? What do you do?
Do we have a part? Don't I wish? But maybe about half. This is what we will do as part of our first quarter budget presentations. It relies on how much fund balance was unspent from last year that carries forward to help pay for the current year's spending. And so and we primarily focus on the 5 major funds, right? And so the 22 million, part of that is from the 5 major funds. And so we'll be discussing that as it carries forward into this fiscal year to help support services. So it's not unusual. I mean, departments spent 96% of their budgets, and in a year of still a pandemic, vacant positions, events could overtake them what their plans were for the year. So there's a story to go with each department as to why it didn't spend their budget, or another way is that they managed their resources in order to continue delivery of services, but it didn't cost as much. So it's a good thing to not spend every dollar.
Yeah, you'd hope. It's worse to go over. So anyway, well, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Ms. LaFrance, I think that this is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just really quickly, a comment on the fire department and managing their overtime. It strikes me as a much bigger issue than simply overtime. And I've stated before my concerns about rolling closures, and that saving some funds does come at unacceptable risks to public safety. So I would really like to see this as a priority for the administration to address the fire department budget without relying on rolling closures. And then, if I may, Mr. Chair, I have a side question, and please It's related to some of the questions we get from members of the public about operating costs associated with operations of different facilities, specifically the Golden Lion, which was purchased as part of the stipulation for the sale of municipal light and power and intended to be used as a substance misuse treatment center. And I did send these questions to Ms. Demboski and Mr. Gerace on Monday and recognize it may take some time for them to respond. And it occurred to me that Ms. Frasca may be able to provide some information. So the questions from the public include who has paid for the cost of utilities, electrical, water, sewer, heat at the Golden Lion since WECA Medical moved in? And if the MOA has paid for any portion of the utility costs, what was the monthly amount during which WECA was in the facility, and where on the actuals report would those costs show if they are in there? And then where can members of the public find the lease or user agreement between WECA and the MOA? So the question right now to Ms. Frasca would be, are those costs in these actuals, and where are they located? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Frasca, did you catch all of that?
I did, and the answer is I don't know, but I'm sure with working with Ms. Demboski, we'll get you those answers. But I do need to make a correction to something I said. When I said that the 22 million included the alcohol tax unspent dollars, that's incorrect. I was wrong, and it does not, because as you know and appreciate, the alcohol tax revenues and spending are all in their own budget. And so they're not part of general government. So this 22 million does not include the leftover alcohol tax proceeds or spending.
Thank you, Ms. Frasca. Ms. Zolotel, you're in the queue, and this will be the last question, I think, and then we're probably going to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question, especially as we go into first quarter budget revisions, is I know we'll look at those departments that went over their budget, but I'm really wanting to hear the story, at those that are at the, 86% spend or really low spends. I have the suspicion, seeing that's the health department purchasing, that those services in those departments were either reimbursed by FEMA because they were emergency related, and personnel were reassigned. But I don't want the lower spend to potentially drive decisions without the full picture, particularly with regard to the health department, which we've been working on making sure is fully staffed and able to take on some significant public health challenges beyond COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zolotel. Yeah, I think I would echo that. I think as we go into first quarter budget revisions, and I know that there's more information on this slide that we could have, or into this presentation we could have dug into, but I think part of the story is, yeah, why did these departments, so many of them, come in under budget? Maybe we just did such a great job in last year's 2021 budget that we passed the year before, and we left the city in very good financial health. And I'd like to believe that, but I also suspect that there are other outside factors like FEMA that played a role. So yeah, that's something to definitely that we will have to delve into more next month. So with that, are there any other questions or comments? I think that yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a lot more time. We're actually already over, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.